Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another amazing best practices webinar, partnership between Transfinder and NYAPT. We are really excited about today's webinar. I know I say that about every webinar, but really, I just feel like we keep going deeper and deeper into things that are of importance to transportation offices across the country. And again, we have panelists from not just New York, but also in Ohio makes a big play today. So we're so thankful for our webinar panelists. So today's focus is all about budgeting and futurecasting. And so I'm not going to get into too much detail until we have our head of the executive director of NYAPT joining us, and he'll help introduce our panelists, and we'll get going. I want to just remind people that you are part of this webinar, that we have a section there for you to ask questions or make comments, and I am reviewing those all the time, and so is Bridget, who also works for Transfinder, has been working the back end. And so we would love to include your comments in as part of the conversation. So please make sure that you throw in, if you have something that's specific to one of the panelists and you want to ask them a question, please feel free to do that. We'll keep on top of that. And also just a reminder that these webinars are all recorded, and you can find them. And if you go to transfinder.com, we have a YouTube link, and then we have those posted right away. So usually by tomorrow it'll be posted, if not today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce David Christopher. Dave.
Thank you, Rick. And again, thank you for partnering with us on these important webinars. I tell you, they seem to get more and more involved, and we get deeper and deeper into some great discussions as we move along with these. So I'm thrilled to be here, and I want to thank the panelists for being here. Without the panelists, these wouldn't be possible. And to echo what you just said, attendees, please ask questions and weigh in when something comes up of interest, because the more input we get here, the deeper and deeper we get in these discussions. So it's all good stuff. So I want to start out by introducing the panelists. We have a great group of people today. Going to have to start off with Bill Harvey, who's the Director of Transportation Security at Honeoye Falls. He's a usual attendee or panelist on these webinars. I want to thank Bill for taking the time. Next, we have Bruce Berry from Black River School District in Ohio. He's the Director of Transportation. Thank you, Bruce. We had a pre-webinar yesterday where we kind of talked things over, and Bruce really shared a lot of great information. Next, we have Chad Welker from the business official from Twinsburg City School District in Ohio. Thanks, Chad, for being here. You bring a different perspective to the discussion coming from the business office. And last but not least, we recruited Dave Richardson at the last minute from the Big Grease School District out by Rochester. Dave is the Executive Director of Student Operations at Grease. And thanks, Dave, for hopping in here. We had one slot empty, and I said, geez, I've had several conversations with David about a whole bunch of different things, and he'd be an excellent panelist. So thanks for agreeing to do this. So should be an interesting hour. I'll turn it over to Rick, who will direct the conversation. Rick,
thanks so much. Yes, and I should say something up front. The person we had who was slotted to fill in originally, I don't know if you guys can relate to this at all, but he has a driver shortage, and he had to drive yesterday. And then he sent me a note saying, I'm not going to make it tomorrow, Rick. I'm really sorry. And I didn't know what he was talking about. Haha. So he had to fill in, and I know that you guys have had to do that as well. So that's just the nature of the beast. And so I've heard that a lot, unfortunately. So thank you so much, David, for pitch hitting, and I know you're going to do great. So I just want to start off talking a little bit about, first of all, if you could just introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your district. Now, Bill Harvey, we have to always have you go deeper, come up with some new interesting factoid, because you already probably know the number of routes you have and the number of students. So you got to give me something unique for you. But I'm going to start with Dave Richardson, and then Chad and Bruce, to give you some time, Bill, to come up with some interesting factoid about something, and then we'll get into the questions here. So go ahead, Dave. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your district.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. Grease Central School District is a suburb of Rochester, New York, just northwest of the city of Rochester. We have about 10,500 students in our district, and we have another 1,000 students that we transport to 66 different private parochial, charter, and special ed schools. So on a given day, we have about 165 runs. Not to mention we contract out because of the driver shortage for about another 35, which is a challenge. So all in all, we're about 200 routes each and every day for about 10,000 kids.
Wow. Wow. Thank you so much, David. Chad.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm from Twinsburg State School District. We're a suburb of Cleveland, Ohio, and we transport about 3,000 students, and our district's about 4,200 students, just to give an idea. And we operate about 40 buses across the community.
And you're the business manager. How long have you been there?
I've been here for 8 years, so.
So if you guys have anybody who's listening, it's unique that we have a business manager on the webinar. So I want to encourage you to try to stump Chad with something. We can have like a little segment called Stump Chad. But seriously, if you have budget questions, I think he would be a great person to ask those unique planning questions too. Bruce Berry, take it away.
Hi, I'm Bruce from Black River School District in rural Ohio. I currently have 12 bus routes and 2 white van routes. We serve and transport about 800 students a day, and we are very rural. Our district covers 114 square miles. We have 1 high school, 1 middle school, and 1 elementary school. I also serve as Ohio's Association for Pupil Transportation's secretary statewide.
Very good. So that's the NYAPT of Ohio.
Correct.
Transfinder is also a member of that group as well. I hope that doesn't bother you, Dave. I hope we're good with that.
No, we have a secretary too.
All right. And Mr. Harvey, I want to hear what you got. That's going to tell us a little bit about your district and yourself, of course. But I want to hear that little interesting factoid about your district.
All right, so my name is Bill Harvey. Thanks again for having me. Director of Transportation and Security at Honeoye Falls-Lima School, located here in Western New York, south of Rochester. We're transporting about 2,200 kids on 40 bus routes a day. And I've been at it for, in the business anyway, for about 38 years. And interesting tidbit is that we conduct 1.25 bus stops for every mile traveled per day.
Say that again.
We conduct 1.25 bus stops for every mile traveled per day.
Interesting.
So if you look at the ratio of how many miles per day, bus stops per day, it's about 1.25. So I get that through my Transfinder analytics, the summary column. Yeah.
All right. I love that. That's awesome. Nice little plug there. Thank you.
So what's interesting about that though, some people would say, well, what good is that data? But when you're presenting your budget and you hear, oh, you got a bus stop on every corner, that's a great piece of information to provide to the public to explain that not necessarily a stop on every corner. It's spread out, and of course it's all relative to your school district. But that's interesting, Bill. Thanks for sharing that.
Actually, Dave, I'm glad you said that, Dave, because I actually didn't know what that would really mean. I mean, so that actually, you helped provide some context there. That's great. Analytics, our CEO, Antonio Sotella, I mean, he's very big into analytics. It's all about what can you measure, and that's how you can look at, and that's what we're talking about today. You can see trends because you can document things, and you can see, you get Excel spreadsheets, I mean, that's how it's claimed to fame. You can look and see, oh, you're not caught off guard because you can kind of see the trajectory of things, when it's written down, it's measured, it's tracked. So just a broad question here, and I'm going to start with Bill. I'll work my way backward, and Dave, obviously, I don't need to invite you to jump in anytime because you always add a lot. I'm going to start with Bill, and we'll work our way to Bill, Chad, and David. What does 2022-23 look like for you in comparison to 2021? This past school year, this current school year. We know that there was an anomaly, during 2020, but last year got a little bit more normal. But give me a sense of what you're looking at, and as you're putting together the budget for this upcoming school year.
Well, I'm very optimistic about the upcoming school year with respect to some adjustments we've made in our compensation for our staffing. I think that it's very important that we get our departments fully staffed. And so this upcoming budget year, we will be able to do that by offering a more competitive compensation package. So, you know, the number one most important thing that any of us can do in our transportation departments, be at full staff, because it's hard to move the ball forward when you're just trying to survive every day, right? So, you know, that's one piece that I see for next year. And the other piece I see is opportunity to really move forward using some of the monies that have been allocated to schools and communities to recover and improve from the pandemic. So we're making steps to taking steps to improve the air quality on our buses and have some form of HVAC through air conditioning and advanced filtration systems. So we're staying on track with our fleet rotation. I think it'll be another year of returns, right? Of maybe late bus will return next year, activity buses, field trips, things like that. So we'll continue on the trend back to normal. We'll see some great enhancements on our buses for the safety of our students and staff with respect to air quality, cabin air quality, and hopefully get this staff up to full strength.
You made a comment yesterday about the view of air quality in the buses. In the past was just roll down the windows, open the top, and
Yeah.
you were frustrated a little bit about there's a distinction in the value of the air quality in the school versus the air quality on a bus.
Right. So, you know, in a school, in a classroom setting with HVAC in our schools, we have set filtration, right? How many microns? What are we grabbing out of the air? How many times per hour are we changing over the air in a educational space? And on the bus, we're told to roll the window down, crack the roof hatch, and turn your fans on high, right? So if you're in an area like David Richardson is, closer to the city of Rochester, maybe you don't get the wide open road driving that we get in a more rural community. And I think we owe it to our kids. They should have safe air quality, whether they're on the bus or in the school classroom.
Very good. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Bill. Bruce, looking at 2022-23.
Well, first of all, I think we're looking to have a more normal year. This year was better than the previous year, but we're still, you know, trying to catch up, I guess is the way to put it. We're going to start negotiations with our support staff and the union. So I'm hoping that maybe we can get some increases in the hourly labor rate, get our bus driver pay up a little bit better to attract some more drivers. I basically have one substitute right now, so it's myself and the athletic director that are kind of filling all the gaps. You know, the other thing that I'm kind of excited about is that we are looking at some grants statewide that will assist us in purchasing a bus and some technology to improve some technology. So I'm hoping that eventually with that we can go from, I have Route Finder Pro right now, and I'm hoping maybe we can advance and start utilizing Plus a little bit more.
Bruce, I think yesterday you said this. We're going to get into fuel costs in a second,
Right.
but I think you said something about last year you traveled 630,000 miles. Is that correct? And your normal mileage traveled would be, am I right? Am I remembering this correctly? 700?
I think that was Bill, wasn't it, Bill?
Is that you, Bill? I'm sorry. And that normally would be 750,000 miles. Is that correct? You're on mute, I think.
COVID was about 750,000, and this year we're doing about 630. And the year prior we dropped down to like 430. So it's you know, as Bruce says, trying to get back to normal also, you know, impacts our budgets with how many gallons of fuel we burn and labor hours.
Yes. And I think you said something like it's hard to budget for an anomaly. So I remember I thought that was good.
Exactly.
So Chad, How about you? How does 2022-23 look for you guys? What are you excited about, concerned about?
Yeah, so we're excited about hopefully returning to normal, and like all our field trips are returning. So just feels good to maybe get out of this pandemic for a little bit. Staffing, of course, is an issue for us. So we've been promoting a lot locally and doing a lot of incentive programs for our bus drivers and other community members to refer bus drivers. That's where we've gotten our best source. But as much as I would love to say that we're going to have full staff next year, one of the things I'm really concerned about is having those contingency plans, because every year I try to have the best staffing, and then every year I keep losing people, you know. So the thing that I'm really excited about for next year is the addition of Wayfinder. It's something that's bothered me for 10 years. Is we ask our sub drivers to go onto a bus on a route that they don't know, and pull out a route sheet in Ohio, put it on your lap, and try not to be distracted. And very excited about Wayfinder having the route on the tablet for our contingency plans, for our sub drivers to be able to have turn-by-turn instructions. And I think that's just going to make things a lot better than we have in the past.
Just to stay on that for 1 second, only because I know Bill talked about it yesterday, the idea of how not, and Chad, you and I talked, David, I promise I'll get to you, about how to not have a massive expense, not that Wayfinder's expense massive, but when you do these, that you do the incremental, I think you had both of you have pilot programs, and you do it incrementally so as to keep things at an even keel.
Yeah, I work real hard on trying to make sure that my budgets are predictable, and that I share those key metrics with the treasurer. The last thing a treasurer wants is a lack of predictability. And so from that standpoint, worked real hard on if there's a high initial investment, not saying Wayfinder is one of those, but if there is a high initial investment, trying to cover that through a grant, then trying to normalize your budgets so that each year you're not having to fight for too much more other than increases to maybe the number of miles driven, which people generally understand, or inflation, you know. So trying to make my expenses as predictable as possible, so that it's sustainable over time.
Very good. And David, last but not least.
Yeah, I would agree with many of the points that Bill, Bruce, and Chad brought up. From my district, when I look at expenses that will be different for the 22-23 school year, I'm looking at actually cost savings by providing less accommodations to our families. And accommodations not necessarily meaning special ed. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about going above and beyond to meet the needs of our families. We have in New York State an April 1st deadline for private parochial and charter school applications. We've always granted those applications regardless of when they've been submitted, and now we're pushing back on that. So we're likely going to be transporting, of our 1,000 private parochial and charter school students, we will likely be transporting less of those students within 15 miles of Greece. The second thing is, what could be added cost is we've seen a significant increase in student behaviors, both in school as well as discipline issues on our school buses. So as you likely know, we have different kinds of attendance. We have what I call mandated attendance tied to special ed, which are aidable positions. And then we have behavior attendants, which are basically a second set of eyes to help control the students on the bus and provide a safe transportation to and from school. we're looking to increase our number of behavior attendants to support the safety of our students and our driver going into next year. With the zero emissions call for buses starting in 2027, obviously there's a lot of questions. I know that'll probably be a topic later on, but we need to start educating our staff, whether it's our garage mechanics, our drivers, our attendants, just what is this initiative? What does it look like, sound like, feel like? And there's a ton of questions, but some of that professional development will start next year. And professional development is obviously funded by my department. And then the unknown is fuel and the third party. So, you know, my March fuel bill was $180,000 higher than my February bill. So it's not, and who knew that gas prices would be as high as they are now? Last April, when our budget for the 21-22 school year was created. So, and then obviously third party contractors, due to the driver shortage, you know, I might be looking at more runs given to a third party, so I'm in not such a dire need on a daily basis. Like this morning, I had 11 runs uncovered, so 11 different buses got the robocall saying that their student was on a 30 to 2 hour delay to school, and in the end, that's not right. You know, our kids end up losing, and you know, we got to do better.
So a couple quick things. You have covered a lot. That's really, thank you so much, David. A lot of perspective there. I'm just real curious about the behavior for a second, if you don't mind. I know it's not really about budget, but I guess I'm just a little curious if everybody else is seeing an uptick. It seemed like when the mask mandate was going on and kids on buses, we were hearing, like, surprisingly, that there was really good behavior on buses, and the people were, so are we seeing is that a part of a return to normal too, unfortunately? Or what do you think that is, David, that's causing, is that returning to what it used to be? Or
there's a number of factors that I attribute it to. During COVID, many of my drivers would joke that they were driving a limousine because it was a yellow limousine because there was maybe a third of the students on the bus, whether it was a hybrid situation with our school year, whether it's parents increasing you know, the number of kids being transported to school by mom or dad. You know, the buses were at somewhere between 30 or sometimes less. At our high schools, it would be 10%, 30 and 50% capacity. Now our buses are full. They're somewhere between, I'll say 65 and 100% capacity, depending on the run. But some of the behaviors we're seeing are also from some of our youngest students. You know, when I'm seeing infractions at the kindergarten, first and second grade level that I have never seen before, raising to the level where the bus driver has to pull over because the bus is unsafe from a kindergarten. Like, so, you know, is it because of COVID? No, but it's, you know, we didn't see this level of infractions and student behaviors that caused either 911 to be called, the bus to get pulled over, security, you know, called to the scene, or the driver to feel unsafe, not unsafe towards the student, but unsafe because they're looking at their mirror more than their road because they're concerned about student safety on the bus. So there's a number of things that contribute to it. And when the driver is the only one on the bus for 66 kids, that can be problematic.
thank you for sharing that.
Just as an FYI, we've been advocating for, oh gosh, Bill, what, 4 or 5 years here for the state to aid monitors on school buses for school districts that choose to use them for disciplinary reasons, for behavior reasons. We'll have to, you know, look into maybe pursuing that a little further, because we are hearing that across the board that behavioral issues are problematic now that you know, schools are back in, you know, pretty much full session. Yeah.
Because it was kind of strange when we were hearing, I'm sorry, go ahead, Bill.
I think that is something we're seeing, and it's not just on the bus, right? It's in, because I, you know, like a lot of us, I wear dual hats, so I'm also the security director, but we've had a huge uptick in behavioral issues at the school buildings. during the school day. And yeah, and I think it's part of the trying to get everybody back to the norm. And we have pushed hard. There was some legislation in New York that would have required bus monitors on every bus transporting students K through 6. And we were not, as an association, NYAPT was not 100% behind that. We were behind the concept of people, ourselves, Greece, HFL, being able to use bus monitors for behavioral issues. Right now, we only get compensated through New York State aid on their salary if they are on the bus due to an IEP for special needs. So that's something that we need to look at as an industry, and it ties directly to the driver shortage, right? Because it makes that driver's job that much harder, right? So it's an important piece, Dave, that you're focusing on.
Yeah, I think there's two things I just heard in terms of the driver shortage issue. One is, actually three. One is pay scale. Second is, I think to Chad's point, the GPS, I'm trying to be agnostic here, GPS driver directions systems. I mean, it's very difficult for a substitute to come on board and use a piece of paper to figure out the rights and lefts. So I think that's a value add. And also the student behavior management piece, that three things that we could probably do that would help the driver shortage issue.
Yeah, because who's going to want to drive if they hear all these other things? That's going to be
Yeah.
Chad, I want to talk to you, and I want everybody else to jump in as well. How do you deal? Because Chad, you and I talked earlier about fuel costs and how your district handles. Because I'm like, how do you budget for this continuing fluctuating fuel costs? And is that something that's a responsibility of the transportation office, or is that responsible for the district? And how do you handle that? So you had an interesting point, and then everybody else, please feel free to jump in on how you handle these fluctuating fuel costs.
Yeah, so I work real hard in making sure that we really talk about what we can control. So we can control how many miles we're driving to an extent, and how many, so then how many gallons. So my treasurer really understands how many gallons am I driving in a year, and then it becomes more of a utility discussion in our district. So when that increase did happen, and we were certainly at the $5.50, $6 a gallon, is showing, okay, we are controlling it. We aren't doing any more miles than we've done in the past, or if we are, I have an explanation. But just trying to make sure that it becomes more of a utility cost, just like electric or natural gas, as opposed to having to be something that stays within a fixed budget for transportation.
Very good. Bill, I saw you nod your head.
Yeah, and I think it is very much like the utility bills, and the districts have contingency funds built in to for unforeseen expenditures. Just like I'll use the example of having a family move in that needs special services for one or more of their students, and you have to have that service set up and underway in a reasonable period of time, let's say within 30 days, and maybe it requires another bus and a driver and a monitor. I had that happen to me this year, right, where I had a school I didn't go to, and all of a sudden I'm going there for a student that has significant needs, and I had to hire staff and come up with another wheelchair bus. So you can't budget for that, right? Those are the anomalies you can't account for. So I know that, and Chad would probably speak to this, but there's a desired target that you want to hit in budgeting, right? You don't want to fall short on your budget every year, but you don't want to be over by a significant amount. I mean, we used to try to hope to have an excess of 3 to 5% in your budget at the end of the year. And so I don't know, Dave or Chad, if you have a number, what would you expect a department head to have residual in their budget at the year end?
I would agree with that 3 to 5% target. That's generally you're hoping people aren't going all the way to zero, so that you have a little bit of a contingency fund yourself.
Right.
But then again, I think there's expectation that, or understanding that this past gas price increase, there was no way you were going to estimate that that far in advance.
So Bruce, I see you shaking your head. You mentioned a few times, and I told this to Chad earlier as well. Well, I'd like to hear, by the way, all of you at some point share with me how you approach your budget in terms of how early in the is it like the beginning of the school year? When do you start your budget process, basically? But Bruce, you mentioned a couple times this idea of robbing Peter to pay Paul. Tell me a little bit about that. How does that work? What areas do you have that flexibility to do that kind of stuff? I think Chad came up with an expression. We don't want to use the word slush fund, but some flexibility in there. But Bruce, tell me a little bit about your approach.
So I do quarterly budgets based on what we had done in prior years. So I keep a spreadsheet so that I track everything that comes out of my office. If I've got, let's say I get a delivery of supplies for the buses, like towels and different things, Windex, whatever it is. So I get the invoice, I approve the invoice, and then I plug it into my spreadsheet and I see where our expenses are. I mean, are we spending more money in this area? So what do I need to do then to kind of even things out? In a sense, rob Peter to pay Paul. So I've got like a over umbrella amount of money.
Unknown caller.
Basically, sorry about that. Basically that I have a total amount of money and then I have to divvy it up between all these different vendors. Okay, so I have a purchase order for, let's say, Rush trucks for parts. I have another one for a fuel. I have another one for, whatever it might be. So when I say robbing Peter to pay Paul, I really don't want to have to go over my total budget amount, but yet I want to be able to take into effect those fluctuations of prices. So like for this last budget, the last quarter for this year now, what I've done was I've tried to actually reduce my budget by 20%, knowing that, things are tight, the cash flow in the district's a little bit tight. And if we can wait and spend it later, that's what I meant by robbing Peter to pay Paul. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we'll see how it goes. Right now, it's pretty tight because part prices are up, all the prices are up. And then we have the supplies that we don't know when they're going to arrive. For example, seat foams. We need to have those on stock in order to replace bad seat foams for inspection, or the bus isn't going to pass the inspection. So we have an order of seat foams that we put in probably 6 months ago that we're still waiting on because of the supply lag. So all these unknowns make it really difficult. I guess my way of doing things, if I'm tweaking that every 3 months, I can kind of move things around and still get business done and stockpile as much as I can.
So your budget is kind of like a little bit of a living document where you're looking at it periodically to make adjustments. Bill, I see you shaking your head. I'd like to hear Bill, and then both, Chad and David, tell me a little bit about your own process. And Dave Christopher, of course, you did it for many years as well. So if you have some tidbits too that might be useful in building that budget and keeping it so that it's actually based in reality. But go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I agree with Bruce with respect to the importance of keeping your eye on the ball throughout the year, right? You don't want any surprises. You don't want to have to go to your Chad and say, hey, sorry, but I'm in the hole deep here, right? So it's nobody likes surprises. So I always, I run an appropriation status report every 2 weeks. Just keep my eye on it. If there's something that jumps out at me, I'll cover that with whatever department head, with my shop or with training or office staff. So But as far as getting the process going, I mean, typically that would start as soon as we really kind of get our feet on the ground and school's running. By the time you hit Thanksgiving, you know, we're looking hard at budget and process and developing. And, you know, a big piece of the budget's easy, just rolling forward what you used last year. And can I trim this a little, or do I need to expand it a little? You know, with respect to parts and supplies and tires and oil and grease and antifreeze, uniforms, things like that. Really where you need to put the thought in is, you know, new initiatives maybe, or acquisition costs or new projects like what we've done with Wayfinder. In the past, we did that with two-way radios. I think it took us a total of 4 years to transition everything over to a voice over IP radio system that provided us a much more robust system, but it also expanded our costs because what was quote unquote free airtime, we now, you know, pay $25 or $30 a bus per month. But we eased into that and spread that over a longer period of time. So that's really where the focus and the creativity comes in, is like what initiatives are out there. And you don't want to sit down on December 1st and try and figure out what interests you for the upcoming year. That's something that, like, you want to be looking at a year or two ahead, right? Watching the industry, watching the trends. I can tell you I was sub-driving, which I've done a lot of over the last year or two with all the, I've always sub-drove, but I've been driving a lot lately, and I was in a cul-de-sac early in the morning this winter, and I knew there was a garbage truck kind of following my route, and he's coming down the road, and so I waited in the cul-de-sac to let him come in and go to the right, so that, because we wouldn't be able to pass each other. But I noticed as he came slowly into the cul-de-sac and his door's open and he's on his little stool there driving, and I looked and he's got this beautiful computer screen with little dots outlining the cul-de-sac and which garbage cans he needs to pick up. Meanwhile, I'm holding my sheet, my route sheet, right? I'm like, there's something wrong with this picture. The garbage man has. So, you know, but that's watching the trends in the industry and focusing in on what you think can benefit your operation most, and then putting together a plan for how you can ease into that, and not only ease into it fiscally, but also to ease into it as far as introducing these new concepts to your school boards and your community and your staff, right? A lot of times I'll dribble these things out. Like when I'm doing my budget presentation, I'll dribble out a little something about what they'll be hearing about next year, right? So I always want to be like sprinkling it out ahead.
Good. I like that. I like that. Very strategic. So Chad and David, you guys want to tell me, you know, anything you want to add in terms of your process that that's worked for you over the years?
I think for us, I like to have different layers of plans. So a long-term plan, like a five-year plan, and then looking at that on an annual basis and seeing what adjustments you need to make. Definitely agree with Bruce and Bill in regards to having quarterly updates or monthly updates or some sort of periodic updates. A couple things that I would stress. One is make sure that you're networking with all of your neighboring districts too, finding out some of their best practices, figuring out what they're investing in as well, because no superintendent wants to get left behind from one of their neighbors. So if your neighbor's investing in something, it makes that sales pitch a lot easier. So just those different networks, I think is pretty important. The other thing I was going to say is the more you're able to get like your shop invested in meeting their budgets, like that you get that buy-in from them, the better. And so I actually work real hard at having layers of budgets so that I reward people if they go under budget by 10, 20%. Maybe they can get that investment that they were looking for, especially with the mechanics. I don't know that much about the upkeep of a bus. And really your mechanic on a day-to-day basis, they're negotiating for you. And so if you tie them into that, they get a reward at the end, the more you can build some of those things better, I would say.
That's great. I like the idea of just getting more buy-in, and you're getting more, you talked about various layers there of buy-in, really. That's great. David, anything you want to add?
Yeah, our budget season starts in December. We are looking at 3-year history, and we start with an average of the last 3 years. Then there's discussions that occur about, as Bill and Bruce and Chad have stated, do we need to increase that, decrease that, and why? We have an initial budget proposal made to the Board of Education in March for refinement throughout March and the early part of April, and then a formal budget adopted for the voters in April to then propose, and the community votes on it in May. This year's budget vote is Tuesday, May 17th. So it gives the districts about, or gives our district about a month to advocate for that budget, and we conduct community forums and solicit feedback from the various stakeholder groups throughout the month of April and the first part of May. This is my 20th year in school administration. This is my first year going to be finishing in the red. So as Bill said, it's never good to say, hey, I didn't forecast this, I didn't forecast that, or my budget is looking terrible. But that's me this year. Great example is I forecasted 600,000 for fuel. I'm now at 1.1 million, and we still got 2 months of the school year left. I'm also finishing a capital improvement project for a brand new bus garage with 12 bays. I have 350 staff members that I oversee, and the project was supposed to be done September 1st. We weren't able to move in until January 1st. And the project is still not completed. So you heard Bruce talk about supplies. Tires have just tripled in cost. We're waiting on parts. When you have a new capital improvement project, you have unexpected costs that are not able to be picked up by the project. So who eats that? Me. So I'm at the point now where I have a great relationship with my superintendent and my school business official, but I don't even beg anymore. I just say, here's where I'm at. I can't get to June 30th from a fiscal sense fast enough.
Well, David, I got to tell you, with all the stress that you just mentioned, you are cool as a cucumber, man. Because I'm like, you are one cool dude, man. Seriously, it's got to be tough. I was going to mention, Bruce and Chad don't have the same challenges that Bill and you have of having to get the community to approve your budget, right? I mean, Bruce, tell me, you were telling us this yesterday. Who approves your budget? Bruce.
There we go. So our Board of Education is the last layer that we have to go. We don't have to have anything approved by voters for our budgets. So is that the same for you, Chad, as well?
Yeah. So it's a little easier for us in Ohio from that standpoint.
And in New York, right, we have to keep it. David, what's the limitation for
2.5%?
2.5%. So
2%, yeah.
Before we go any further, real quickly, I don't know if we can answer this question directly or if we have to get back, but Shayna asked a question to anybody, I guess, if anybody could recommend a school finance class to help with budgeting. So I don't know if anybody's ever taken anything, or if you have a resource, we can add it as a link on our webpage. Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Up to the New York Association for Pupil Transportation Functions. We do school finance, we do state aid, often. We just did a workshop on data-driven decision-making, which you're all talking about right here, right now. I mean, we're talking about managing your budgets, which is probably the most difficult part of this process, right? I mean, developing the budget's a 2 or 3 month process, but when you manage it, it's a 12-month process, and that's the skill set that most people need in order to be successful. So I'm not sure if she's in New York though, if she's outside of New York.
No, Dave, I would think that the answer, like even if she's not in New York, every state has an association, and I would, it comes back to what Chad, networking and being a part of your state, local or national pupil transportation associations, because there's a lot of training and expertise offered, from those affiliations.
She just let me know.
Try to get her to come to New York, Bill, but that's okay. Just one of Chad's points, a leadership piece involving everyone in the budget process, the decision making and the management of the budget. Very important, right, to involve your technicians and your staff in that management of that budget process, because to your point, Chad, they kind of spend the money. So that's a great point that I think you made.
I think another real important thing to talk about is try to make, even though transportation is one of the most complex systems ever, that I think most people do not understand how complicated it is, how complicated logistics are. Try to make your budget as simple to understand. So different metrics, or looking at your efficiency ratings, looking at the metrics that Bill and Dave were talking about, and just trying to keep it simple so that your superintendent and your treasurer can feel confident in understanding the predictability of what those costs are. So just try to keep it as simple as you can, while still allocating the proper funds.
So in a tight, and then we have a poll question I want to make sure we get to, but real quickly, in a tight budget environment that we live in today, is technology a luxury, or is it something that can be argued as a critical tool to become more efficient? Like if you can show that a certain technology, like a routing software program, for example, I just threw that one out of nowhere, that could make you more efficient, could you make the argument to even if it's going to cost you up front, but in the end it's going to actually save you? Can that be part of an argument, or is technology, or certain technologies, I don't know, it's a kind of a broad question, but is it a luxury, or can you make an argument that it's a necessity even in a tight budget environment? Bill, I saw you nodding your head, so I'll go to you first.
Yeah, I think it's a necessity. There's the old saying that you can't manage what you don't measure, right? So, we have budgeting software that we can look at, but having the right routing software, operational software. I run software in my shop, right? So we can manage our cost per mile and understand what we're spending and where we're spending it. And life cycle the buses, so that when I go and ask for replacement vehicles, we have the data that substantiates the ask. And then I think that on the routing piece, like the Wayfinder, right? It does two things really. For me, the two main things I'm looking to get out of a product like a navigation system is I want not only the navigation, but I want to capture the attendance, the ridership in an easy way. Now we've been taking attendance for years. With the onset of COVID, we went to taking attendance on every trip, every day, AM, PM, but it's on a check sheet. I can't do anything with that unless somebody sits down and enters that into a spreadsheet. So if you can automate that process using technology, then you can look at ridership and see if I only have 60% utilization of a piece of equipment. And maybe when I'm doing my routing, if I have a target of 80% utilization, right, then I can use that data. So the technology is going to give you the data. With the data, you can better manage your operation.
Excellent, excellent. Anybody else want to add to that?
I'll go back to Chad again. He made a point about predictability of expenses.
Yeah.
I wonder if, what are your feelings about, anybody on the panel, what are your feelings about leasing this kind of technology versus purchasing? That gives you a sense of predictability. Plus, this technology does have a lifespan. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that, Dave, as far as leasing. And I don't know if it's possible to lease like routing software and things like that, but I mean, the hardware, right? The tablets, like if you buy something, it has a life cycle, right? So, perhaps leasing some of that sort of those pieces, I think would be hotspots, things like that change over time. So,
I think
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
When you look at leasing, you want to, the big question from a fiscal standpoint is, how often does the product need to be replaced? And if it needs to be replaced every 5 years at X dollars, is it cheap? Is it cheaper or just as cheap to just buy, you know, the latest version or the upgrade? In Greece, we have 3 forms of technology that we are using. 1, the routing software. 2, our parts and inventory in our garage, which is, we just went to an electronic version of that versus inventory sheets and checklists. And so now that's electronically driven. And then 3rd one is we are trying to find an effective time and attendance system. So, because right now staff are coming in and we have a designated person who sits there and checks people in like it's 1980. So we were trying to electrify and streamline that with our ID cards. You can just scan and go. But transportation, like Chad mentioned, is complicated. You know, our staff members do not work an 8-hour day like all the other employees of the district do. They might work 2.5 hours in the morning, 2 hours midday, 2.5 hours in the afternoon, you know, and there's their 7-hour day kind of thing. So it's, you know, checking in 3 times a day and checking out can be complicated in many ways. But I will say technology does lend the ability for data-driven decision making, and it's sorely needed.
Got a quick question from Lorianne, a past panelist, by the way, and then I got our poll question. Do any of you participate in a shared service or co-op?
Yeah, I'll say yes to that. We're doing that now. As Bill will tell you at our local chapter meetings, I've been encouraging more of that. I mean, it's pretty insane when we drive by a Catholic school and all the buses from our neighboring districts are all pulling in the driveway at the same time, or we're passing them on the roadway. You know, so shared services is something that we do now, and many districts in our area do now, but it's something we are looking to grow upon. Good.
Anybody else?
Yeah, we do the same thing, not only on routes, but also with purchasing. We piggyback or co-op on other districts' bids for parts and things like that. So we do it in multiple facets of the operation. Sometimes, you know, we're assisting other districts, and other times they're assisting us. But with the purchasing, there's larger districts in the county that run some of their own bids that really helps us immensely to be able to piggyback on those.
Very good. All right, we're gonna roll. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'll chime in on that too as well. We use Ohio Schools Council for our fuel purchases, so it's a huge cooperative basically. And then I also am part of the school bus purchasing, so they get the bids and then we commit to purchase X number of buses. So it's very helpful. It does, you know, we do see a cost savings there.
So if someone's looking to get into doing something like that, Dave, Christopher, any suggestions on how, this could be people from across the country who are watching this. So how do they even know what exists that they could possibly be a part of?
Well, I think Chad made the point, network with your neighboring districts and your state associations. But in New York, a lot of those do exist. A lot of cooperative bids through what we call BOCES, which is, you know, a large organization regionally across the state. And of course, our state bids. I think to Lorianne's point, I think what she may be referring to is a bid that exists down in Nassau County that cooperatively bids transportation services, particularly in your situation, Dave, where you got a lot of schools in an area where they, you know, crisscross and they're going to a lot of non-public schools. It's been very effective down there to try to minimize costs. And transportation directors get together and they talk about where they got to go. You know, April 15th is, you know, we're beyond that now. Where they got to go, buses going here, buses going there, and then they do these cooperative arrangements, which is very, very effective. So, you know, I think having run a large school district like yours, Dave, I did a lot of cooperative bids, and a lot of the smaller districts would jump on. So if you're doing cooperative bids, that's helpful to you and the other districts. Smaller districts can get together and, you know, do it on a county basis. In New York, you can even jump, if you're a school district, jump on an existing bid that is out there. So that helps as well. So it's just a matter of, you know, knowing that that's possible and then looking around to see who's doing bids. State OGS does a ton of bids on about everything you can think of. So that's a start, of course.
Dave, I'm going to let you introduce our question. Bridget, if you don't mind moving us to the poll question. And Dave, you brought it up yesterday. It was a good point. You want to introduce it for us?
You know, I wanted to ask this question because obviously, you know, budgets are concerned with inflation, you know, significantly higher and getting higher. You know, state aid in New York is, you know, came through very well for us this year with a significant increase in transportation aid, but with fuel costs, parts costs, everything going up, the question becomes, you know, how are we going to transition to electric buses as required by the recent legislation by 2035? In New York, we're required to only purchase electric buses past 2027. So we wanted to ask this question because this has huge financial impact in terms of not only the bus purchase, but the improvements in your infrastructure as well. So we're looking to get an idea if school districts are starting to spend on infrastructure this coming fiscal year. And that may mean just doing a study of your school district to see what kind of infrastructure you might need, not necessarily breaking ground, because, you know, at some point you got to do the planning. But that's kind of the purpose of this, to get an idea of if you're starting to think about this and if you're going to be spending some money on it.
So please lock in your votes right now. And Bridget, can you give us the results?
Sure. So of everybody who voted, 24% are looking ahead and starting their planning, and 76 have not yet.
All
right. Well, thank you so much, Dave. Did that surprise you at all?
No, because this is real new. The legislation was just passed a couple, 3 weeks ago, and it's very new. We're going to spend a significant amount of time at our summer conference talking about this with utility people and manufacturers and state leaders. So obviously, we'll get more information out and people will start looking at it. But it's kind of the talk of the town in the state of New York because of this mandate to convert to electric buses by 2035. So,
Bruce and Chad, do you guys have any similar types of initiatives?
No. Not at this time. We certainly are monitoring it, and I know there's some clean fuel grants that are coming out that we're certainly monitoring. Right now, we're sort of in the exploration phase. I'm sure they'll come up here in the next upcoming years.
Okay. Well, we're getting close to the end here to wrap up, and I'd like to give you all just an opportunity to just kind of wrap up your takeaway that you would want. If so, someone's watching this, there's a lot of takeaways. I mean, there's a lot of takeaways, but if you could just, somebody going back to their superintendent or going back to their team or just going back to their desk to work on next year's budget, what would be one takeaway that you would want them to have? I'm going to start with David, and then we'll go to Chad, Bruce, Bill, and Dave to wrap us up.
My takeaway is networking. So I think it's important to be talking to transportation directors in your area. If you have a local chapter, you're attending those meetings, state conferences, relying on those people that are in the same field as yourself, because you might feel you're competent and or an expert, but there's always someone out there that has additional practices that might be more fiscally responsible, or practices that can that you haven't even thought about that you can bring back to your district to improve your efficiencies in your operations. So, continue to network. Our field is continuing to evolve and change, especially with the initiatives and directives moving forward. So I feel now more than ever, we need to rely on the people in our fields for support.
Very good. Thank you, David. Dad.
I think my number one takeaway would be just make sure you're communicating with your community, with your treasurer, with your superintendent about the needs for transportation. Try to make sure you're keeping it simple. Bill made a real great comment about the more you're able to compare things to what's going on in the classroom is also very, very helpful. Because a number of the superintendents, that's what they know, right? Is education. Transportation's sometimes not their number one strength, and so just trying to keep it simple so that they understand and are able to support our number one asset, which is our kids. The better it can be.
Excellent. Thank you, Bruce.
Yeah, I would have to agree with David. Definitely the networking and communication, getting involved with neighboring districts, state associations, national associations. Being fiscally responsible is big. I mean, you've only got so much money to work with, so you need to be responsible in dealing. Where does that go? Am I going to rob Peter to pay Paul? That was my big takeaway.
That's good. Very good. Mr. Harvey.
I guess I would tie together the comments of David, Chad, and Bruce by saying that nobody knows what we do, right? And Chad hit on that, the complexity of it, and the more you can draw the parallels to classrooms, to school initiatives, to district goals, the more likely you are to succeed. And I think that the association affiliations, I love the comment that Chad made about, the superintendent doesn't want to be surprised with what the neighbor's doing and being left in the dust, right? So nobody knows what we do. You have to be the expert, right? You shouldn't, the ELDTs that just kicked in that we're all dealing with, it shouldn't have been a surprise to anybody. It's been going on for 3-4 years, right? Same thing with the EV bus movement. Right now, we don't know, if it'll still look the same, or if the goal line will be what it is established as today, but it will be something like that. So we should be getting ready now. So be the expert, network, and understand that people don't know what we do. You got to keep it simple and put it in terms of education.
Very good. Excellent. And Mr. Christopher.
I don't think I can beat any of those. I tell you, our industry is under significant change in every aspect. And, I think it's incumbent upon the leadership in every school bus facility garage operation to understand that and to, take it up a notch and, learn from others, network with others, go to workshops, training sessions, state, local, national events to keep up. And it's becoming increasingly necessary to do that to be successful, not only financially, but remember our number one goal is the safety of the kids we transport. So we have to make sure that we're honoring that as well. So, and I tell you, this panel gives me a lot of confidence that that's being done. Excellent panel today.
Great, super. Thank you for all the panels. When you guys were talking about nobody knows what we do. So as a PR director at Transfinder, one of the expressions I hate the most is we're the best kept secret, because that's usually not a good thing. You don't want a restaurant to be the best kept secret because they're going to go out of business. And you do not want to be the best kept secret in your school districts. Let them, like in Bill, I like what you said about be the expert. There's an expression in media these days about being an influencer, and you guys are all influencers, and embrace it and then the more we do these panels, Dave, Christopher, you know, that your guys are at the table more than ever now. You are at the table of these decisions because they realize, as who was it that mentioned earlier? Oh, David, you mentioned that you know the buses didn't run in a couple. Some of these routes didn't run because, or there was going to be a delay because of the driver shortage. So they know the value and the importance of your role, maybe now more than ever. So that's maybe one of the good things that's coming out of this. So we always are looking for your opinions. This is for all those who are attending here. So there's a QR code. In the next 2 slides, I have the same QR code. So if you're slow with your phone, like I can be sometimes, I've got 2 more slides here. So you know, the same thing. But we just want to get your opinion on you know, the budgeting process and also about future topics for our webinars. This is based on, we combined a few different topics that were focused. Planning was one of them, budget, technology, the coming school year. So we merged a few of these for today's webinar based on your results of the past survey. Again, always looking for stories. And these are not just for our clients. This is for anybody in transportation across the country, North America. What's working for you? If there's anything you've done that will help people to overcome the driver shortage, overcome, you know, dealing with fuel or all these other changes and during this time of fluctuation, we want to hear those stories. So just go to mystory@transfinder.com. Well, I'll probably pester you to become a panelist. And then lastly, next month we're going to continue. We'll be back here again with another great panel and another great topic. We don't have a date yet, but stay tuned. We'll make sure we email everybody. And I just want to again thank our panelists. Thank Dave, Christopher, amazing leadership at NYAPT, and all of our panelists. You just gave a lot of context, a lot of great information. I know people will take back to their offices. So thanks again, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Right.